Thank you so much for that engaging discussion on buildings. And we will now shift our focus to another crucial sector that is both hard to abate and highly significant in the ASEAN region, textiles and apparel. This sector accounts for roughly 10% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And ASEAN stands out as one of the world's key manufacturing hubs, supplying major brands across the globe. So Prof. Switzer already pointed out the emission distribution across the value chain, and it becomes clear that the production stages, particularly the so-called wet treatment stage, which includes dyeing and finishing, offers the greatest opportunities to reduce emissions. And the working groups examined various existing solutions across this value chain, such as recycled materials or process electrification or new business models, as well as recycling methods. But if there are already several effective solutions available, why is there so little progress in decarbonizing this industry? When examining the different obstacles to adoption in the textile and apparel industry, four major challenges emerged. First, the industry is characterized by low margins and an intense cost competition. And even if some solutions bring long-term cost savings, who will bridge the gap for upfront costs and long-term cost savings? Second, sustainability is often not the top priority for customers who might focus more on price or the aesthetics of the product. Engaging and bringing together all stakeholders is also crucial to drive change. However, the current regulatory focus in this industry, as we heard earlier, is often on other relevant ESG topics, such as labor issues or the use of harmful chemicals. Small brands in particular face significant challenges in driving change. And overall, as we also heard for the building sector, the data availability, especially at the scope 3 level, is very limited. Last but not least, as long the energy grid isn't greener, it doesn't help us to electrify all processes to decarbonize this industry. So to tackle these obstacles, the working group came up with different recommendations ranging from financial support from brands for their shared supply chains, investment incentives for equipment upgrades, consumer education to nudge behavior towards buying fewer or high quality pieces, coordination of government efforts across the different ESG areas, support of lower minimum order quantities, which especially supports smaller brands, standardization of data collection across the supply chain, and last but not least, power purchasing agreements to broaden the adoption of renewable energy. May I invite the second panel to come on stage and discuss these obstacles in more detail. In this panel, we have Mr. Eric Nietzsche, Head of ESG and ESG Research and Integration at Manulife. Dawn McGregor, Business Engagement Lead at China Water Risk. Ms. Claudia Chang, co-founder of Butterby Active. Ms. Tan Hui Chi, Director of Sustainability at the Singapore Fashion Council, and Ms. Patak Ape Vijay, Associate Professor at Nanyang Business School.
So we have the unenviable position of giving a panel at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I want to start with just a very quick story to try and get people engaged. And that's in my role, people often ask me, what can I do to reduce my carbon footprint? And I kind of say, that's an important question, but you should really think about what you should be a part of to collectively reduce emissions. And so one example of that is about a year ago, there were a couple of friends who were saying, we're going to all these climate conferences and everyone gets upset and then they get hopeful and they talk and then they leave and nothing gets implemented. There's not enough action that's taken. And I think everyone agrees at a high level, but we need to focus on more kind of what's obstructing the action and how we can take tangible steps. And so maybe a better approach would be before a panel like this, if we have workshops and we bring together industry practitioners and then present. And so that's Matt and Tim. And I think if you look around the room, if you think about what can be accomplished in a year in terms of bringing people together, that's a pretty great example. So how about a round of applause just for that? And so, as Prof. Switzer said, I want to start with really an invitation to hear from the industry practitioners and to think about what tangible actions you can take away. Think about what, kind of you can learn from their experience and take away and kind of implement in your organization. So with that, if I can ask everyone to give a quick introduction, we'll just go down the line.
Yeah, good afternoon all. I am Abhay Pathak. I have recently joined NTU as Associate Professor Practice. Prior to this, I worked with the industry for 30 years, particularly in the manufacturing sector, that too including fashion industry. In my last assignment, I was also part of UNFCCC Fashion Industry Charter. Like Professor Adam has mentioned about the Fashion Pact, there is a fashion industry charter by UNFCCC, and I was on the steering committee of that. I look forward for further discussion here. Glad to be part of this. Thank you.
Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hui Chi, aka HC. I am the Sustainability Director from Singapore Fashion Council. First of all, thanks to the invitation from NBS for having us joining this forum. And we truly look forward to having a very fruitful discussion. But before I pass the ball to the next speaker, I would like to ask how many of you are actually coming from fashion industry? Related or in direct relation or indirect relation? Thank you so much. So just a sharing of my personal experience, I am actually an engineer by training. I'm not a fashion designer. So that means that I try to connect data to try to connect my left brand to right brand. So left-right balance. So look forward. Thank you.
Hi. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Claudia. I come from Butterbean Active. We're a local activewear business that is on a mission to encourage more people to enjoy the happiness out of moving your body instead of pursuing goals in performance or body transformation. As you can see from my profile picture, me and my partner, we are big enthusiasts in hikers and trail running. So that's the very origin where we got the inspiration to start our own activewear line. And because of the root in our love for the nature, we have strived to build a business based on sustainability from our day one. So some of the efforts that we take include using recycled materials, upcycle materials, and use all the more environmental friendly packaging materials and all other small stuff that we try to use. As we have discussed earlier, it's definitely not easy for any fashion brand or any, let alone a smaller fashion brand to start to try to be sustainable in business. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion we'll have later to see if we can do anything to tackle some of the challenges.
Hi, everyone. Dawn from CWR. And we are a think tank headquartered in Hong Kong, and there's a few of us in Singapore. And we help business and investors unpack kind of the complex and interlinked water risks and the related risks, which then brings in climate risks, And because water is how we're going to feel a lot of the climate impacts. And so through that, there's also the water energy nexus, and we do it across sectors, one of which is textiles, and that's why I'm here today. And just to say, I think it's great that there's textile panel at Decarb Forum, because as we've heard already today, there's always the hard to abate. There's always the energy, the steel, the cement. I've rarely seen a non-textile event have textiles on the agenda. So great to see that.
And Eric Nietzsche, I lead the Sustainable Investment Team at Manulife Investment Management, and lead that for our business in Asia. So if we can go, let's see if I can find the recommendations. So if I can ask the panel to kind of elaborate on these recommendations and maybe give a bit of experience of what it's like kind of thinking about these in practice. So Huichi, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eric. So to me, before we actually dive into recommendation, what is popping in my mind right now is stakeholders mapping. So B2B, B2G, and B2C. So what we can actually add value in between business to business, whereby the business to business stakeholders are actually including raw material suppliers, tier 4, they're including tier 3, tier 2, tier 1 in the value chain, and they're including brand owners like many fast fashion or ultra fast fashion brands, and that including, no, that's all B2B, right? They're including solutions provider, and they're including technology providers as well. So B2C is somewhere along brand owners with their consumer, how can they actually package sustainability message and flawedly deliver the message to their consumers. I mean, more importantly is to prevent the greenwashing, whereby we always talk about greenwashing, especially in sustainability for fashion. So this is B2C. So what about B2G? I think that is especially important in an Asian context, because right now, like in comparison to other regions like EU, they are actually advancing the discussion, coming to have about EPR for fashion, EPR for textile, and some other like digital product passport. These could be some of the policies could be enhanced by the local jurisdiction or by the local policy makers. So how business as a collective effort work together to lobby, I would say to influence government in the decision making in order to have a new policy coming out to regulate the circulation of fashion. So that's very important, B2B, B2C, and also B2G. So on from Singapore Fashion Council, we have one very important mandate, which is to convene every stakeholders in the ecosystem to make an impact. And that is why Singapore Fashion Council, we have this vision. We want to drive Asia, especially Singapore, as an Asia regional hub for sustainable, for responsible fashion. So when we call responsible fashion is actually that including sustainability, that including decarbonization, that including diversity, that including inclusion, and etc. So we are putting a lot of focus, especially on the upstream and downstream. Downstream, how we can increase the awareness among the consumers to help them to understand how they can actually make their clothing last longer. So this is one part of our education mandate. And we also have a lot of community outreach to our neighborhood communities to increase the awareness about how to actually maintain and also make your clothes to be used longer, and also reduce the buying. I mean, reduce buying to me personally is quite difficult because it's personal choice, right? Especially with the proliferation of social media right now. Yeah, I think we are trying our best at every level, that including point 6. We are moving towards point 6 to some sort of thinking and also planning ahead how we can actually harmonize the current standards for fashion. So a lot of standards are happening in the fashion right now. That including, of course, ISO is actually the general standard that we are following, and also GHG protocol in the carbon footprint calculation. But could we actually have something that is related to fashion and related to textile? Because in view of this, in light of the textile is actually comparing to building, textile is actually a low value item. And we only use it for the maximum of 10 years, not like building. Once we have built, the building can actually last for 99 years here at least. So I think it is very complex, and it's a complex but very optimistic about the moving forward, about the change moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think the industry organizations they have a good place to play on standards, influencing consumer behavior, and thinking about kind of collective supply chains. Claudia, can you expand on that from a manufacturer's perspective?
Yeah, of course. But before diving into the supply chain side, I just wanted to echo back to what we as a brand can do to nudge the consumers into the right direction. One thing we definitely should not do is to try to stand at a higher ground to educate the customers to say, you should do this or you should do that. I think we should do it very delicately. There's a very careful way for us to do it. But there was one observation from this past weekend we had, because we ran a pop-up event outside of Yongan City this past weekend as one of the vendors. And we put our products out there. We had some signs out there to indicate the characteristics of each product. So for the recycled material part, we had two signs. One says, I'm made of recycled material. Nobody watched that. Nobody cared for it. And the other sign saying, I am made of post-consumption plastic bottles. A lot of people stopped and they were like, wow, this is amazing. How do you make plastic bottles into clothes? So I think it's, as you said, it's really about how we package the story, how we package the marketing materials into stories that can intrigue the interest, can get people excited about it. So this is something that we as a brand, we are constantly testing and trying to do. And I think maybe we can also learn from all the industry peers on how to do it. But then what is really a great challenge for us as a brand is more on the supply chain side. Just one of the biggest challenges me and my partner had when we just started out on the Butterbean journey, because either of us is from textile or fashion industry. I'm from a financial service background. I had no idea how fabric is made in the beginning. But we wanted to use recycled materials. So we went on a long journey, email after email, testing after testing. Finally, we settled on a fabric supplier, a reputable one, who is willing to provide a lower minimum water quantity for the recycled material. And they're charging a premium for it. We're like, okay, fine, premium, we can deal with it. And then we proceeded with it. And when the delivery date was about to come, we were so excited, yay, finally, our first batch of fabric. And then we got a part of the fabric, because for stretchy fabrics they're used to make sports bras or leggings, they're supposed to be stretchy, supportive. And the first batch of fabric we got, they're so loose. You put them on, they're like long johns. So there's no way we can make any products out of that fabric, right? So later on, we actually learned that the quality defect, it's part of the issue that's very common with small order quantities, because when the fabric mill, they make fabrics, especially for the stretchy fabric, after the fabric is knitted from the yarns, they need to go through a processing stage, and the parameters of the machines for the processing need to be set specifically for each fabric. So there's a test and error stage which usually happens to the first, 100 yards of the fabric. Please correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone is more familiar with the fabric mills than me. So with our ordering quantity, probably just a few hundred or a few thousand yards, it's actually not that uncommon to see the first couple of hundred of yards that have quality issues. So when this thing happened, and then we had to redo that particular small batch of fabric, which ended up causing more waste to the environment, which was not something we wanted to see. So when that incident happened, it really intrigued me, like, why don't we have a more flexible solution to smaller brands like ourselves? I don't know, maybe a crowdsourcing platform hosted by, I don't know, maybe a fabric mill or any third party, where we can order smaller quantities, but still they gather the mills can gather all the demands and then still be able to manage to to produce in larger quantities to make sure the fabric meets the quality requirements. So this is something that's really intriguing me to think about. But so far, I don't think we have, at least we haven't seen any solutions like that. But I think it's really, I would really encourage anybody from our textile industry to maybe brainstorm on it, because with this kind of solution, more smaller brands will be able to order the recycled or more sustainable fabrics that we wanted to use. And with the larger quantity producing, the cost for the fabrics will come down, and then brands that are on the fence, maybe because of the higher cost, will also adopt the more sustainable materials. So, but I know there's a lot of obstacles, there's a lot of roadblocks, a lot of challenges posing to the actual execution of the process. But we would be happy to work with our industry association, our peers on that.
Allow me to chime in. I'm just wondering, this would be interesting to also raise this question. How many of you know what is the textile to textile recycling rate on a global basis? Textile to textile recycling. On a global basis, only 1%. So whichever or wherever we see is actually made by recycled material, most of them are coming from plastic, PET, from plastic bottles. So textile to textile recycling right now is still within 1%. So there is really a figure that we can actually keep talking on. How do we encourage textile to textile recycling and reuse?
Yeah.
Thank you, Claudia.
Especially textile to textile recycling, I think one of the biggest hurdles right now is a lot of the fabrics are not made of one single material. For example, for the legging material is polyester or nylon plus spandex. A lot of the cotton t-shirts are cotton plus polyester or any other material. So if it's single material, it's a lot easier to reuse. That's my understanding. If it's mixed with something else, almost impossible. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, we are having, right now in the market, we have many different technologies that treating the textile to textile recycling. That including mechanical recycling is actually the basic. It's really the basic. It's the easiest, mechanical recycling. And most of the mechanical recycling actually recycle cotton, 100% cotton. Then we have chemical recycling. Then also we have enzymatic recycling, biorecycling. So there are many technologies right now. So the challenge right now is, I think it's still, how do we actually scale the innovation into technology? I think that is the point, because I think earlier on, Prof. Matt also mentioned that it's really the economic value. So one recycled product and another one is actually using the virgin material. Virgin material is much cheaper than the recycled product. Why would people want to choose your recycled product over the other, like using the virgin material?
That was one of my takeaways from the kind of workshop discussions, was this issue of how much more difficult the blending of fibers makes the recycling. And that if you were to be able to undo that a bit, then it also potentially unlocks all sorts of other kind of decarbonization gains that you could have around using sustainable approaches to organic fibers and raw materials. Dawn, could you come in on that, just on the kind of the thoughts on the supply chain side?
Yep. So I'm going to take a little bit of a step back first, because I think, as you can see from the discussion, we can pick up from lots of different points and go down rabbit holes. You know, we can talk about recycling mixed fiber, even single fiber shirts are really hard to recycle, and you need to do like a life cycle assessment to determine if it's actually beneficial to recycle that, or downcycle, so on. And this is the issue with textiles. So we heard the buildings panel, and there was, the word hope, that Professor Switzer used. There is hope in buildings. It's big assets, you can have big gains, and the decisions are done at a bigger scale. Textiles, you're a small brand. It's hard. And then there's the brands. And at the moment, they're dominated by fast fashion, a lot of them consumers. Then there's the consumers. We're now accustomed to not just 4 fashion cycles in a year, but 52 or more. There's new products coming in every day in the clothes, in the shops. And people want to buy $5, $10 t-shirts. So they don't want to change that. The brands, they want to keep their margins, although low. And then there's the manufacturers who they need like a long-term signal from brands and from consumers to be able to decarbonize, to be able to be better on water. And so this is an industry that's going to be very hard to decarbonize, actually. And like with all the brains, and we're at a university, I thought I'd just put it out there, like, you're the brains of tomorrow. Like, we need to be thinking about these complex ones, use the word complex, and for you, we need solutions that work at smaller ones, smaller brands, and to go to supply chains. So the big brands, H&M and them, they have preferential contracts with suppliers, manufacturers, and that's nothing new. And that's like if they meet certain environmental, carbon, water, chemical KPIs, they get longer contracts, higher volumes. But that isn't pushing the needle enough. So this is also a sector with a lot of solutions, apparently, but it's not changing. It's not changing fast enough. And given, the climate crisis, it's just not enough. So, yeah. Not very helpful. We specialize in risk, so I'm putting it out there, the problems and the risks. So you guys can solve it, yeah. I'm hot.
So with that, I'm going to quickly deflect to Prof. Bertha. You have an incredible experience working through some of these issues practically in Vietnam. Can you share some of that?
Yeah, I would like to address 2 key challenges that supply chain or manufacturers are facing. One is the regulatory challenge, and second is financial challenge. See, coming to first regulatory challenge, particularly for decarbonization, we know that renewable energy is one of the major key levers for decarbonization. Now, the suppliers or the manufacturers in these countries, I mean, Vietnam or Indonesia, they are very much pro for installation of rooftop solar. But the government authorities are actually in different pockets. I'm not saying it is throughout the country, the situation is like that, but there are different industrial zones. So some of the industrial zones are not allowing industries to put up the rooftop solar. That is the clear situation today. So why industries are looking forward for rooftop solar is because that is their interest as well, because the renewable energy cheaper, they can also improve their productivity and profitability. So they are also looking forward, but there is a regulatory challenge in that. Of course, there is another challenge, which I will discuss later. Another thing is coming to financial challenge. See, the other major lever in decarbonization, we say for textile industry is phasing out of coal. So in textile industry, lot of the industry uses coal boilers. And now if we have to switch on to biomass or any other clean fuel, we need to change the boilers. So there are 2 again aspects. One is CapEx. CapEx is involved. Second thing is there is also an impact on the OpEx, operational cost. Now, even if the supplier say takes care of the CapEx, the operational cost will increase the cost of even produce with the change in the biomass or biomass transition or any other clean gas. So as we discussed earlier, as Karen has mentioned, it is a low margin and very cost competitive sector. So even for 1 cent increase in the produce, there is a lot of deliberation that happens between brands and suppliers. It takes months and years actually to settle the cost of an article. So there also, I mean, from the brand point of view, I think brands can play a huge role. One, from the regulatory point of view, they can influence the policies, the renewable energy policies for securing renewable energy for their supply chain, because they are bringing good FDI to those countries. So they can actually intervene policies and facilitate RE securing in the supply chain. That is one. Second thing is they also need to internalize the cost of emissions into the product, because already if the supplier is actually making it very cost competitive and he has no scope further. So there has to be internalization of the cost of emission that is to be done. So that is also something that brands can do. So from that point of view, I think brands have a huge role to play in this driving decarbonization in supply chain in different countries. Even from the regulation point of view, even if you take a case of Indonesia, if we have to put up, or supplier has to put up the rooftop solar, the PLN doesn't allow the capacity of the rooftop solar beyond 15% of the consumption. So in fact, I had planned a 14 megawatt peak rooftop solar, but I had to scale it down to 4 megawatt peak because the government authorities are not giving the approval for the higher capacities, which depending on the rooftop that is available. So these are the various challenges that we have. We can discuss more depending on the time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I think, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you so much. I can actually echo and also resonate with Prof regarding to the OPEX and CAPEX. And right now, I think moving forward, we shall also talk about the TCO, total cost of ownership. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point that if we look at the emissions breakdown, and you'll notice that the use phase here is about a quarter. In the slide that we saw earlier, it was only a few percent. It depends on basically whether you include the washing machines and the cleaning of the textile as part of the emissions. And that to me makes a lot of intuitive sense. If you think about the power that we consume, in apartments, the power of a washing machine over the 10 years of owning a textile. But that plus the other electrification probably takes care of about half of the emissions if it was coming from green power. And so we need to call out that that's a huge opportunity for decarbonizing this sector, and it's very similar for a lot of other sectors, but that's not really what we focused on in this work, because you could argue whether that's kind of in scope or out of scope for the textile and apparel industry. So when the guidebooks come out, you'll see more focus on the recommendations and the actions in the other areas. And that's also true for other environmental and social topics. We were kind of focusing on decarbonization. So I think in the interest of time, I want to ask the panelists for kind of final thoughts, recommendations, kind of takeaways for the audience. And maybe we'll just go down the line quickly, starting with Dawn.
I think it's to have more discussions around textiles in more mainstream decarbonization talks. And because of the complex nature, which I spoke to a little bit about, and the dynamics on achieving that, we need people from different sectors as well. And so for our working group call, it's really interesting. We do a bit on textiles, but that's not like we do cross-sector work. But you were on the call, like all of us were on these working group calls, and that's what made them really useful, because we had the finance guys, and that's always an issue, when you're looking to do any work, but especially for decarbonizing and getting that financing. So I would say it's to keep having conversations, not just textiles, but other sectors as well that do have significant climate impact, but aren't thought of in that way. And then just quickly, since I'm a water person, you know, whilst we do decarbonize, there's also implications, you know, we need to look holistically at the solutions as well, you know, so to make sure that while we're decarbonizing, while we're doing our other, you know, climate work, to make sure that because sometimes what's good for carbon is bad for water, and it can lead to increased water. And textiles is an industry that's incredibly thirsty, dirty, and polluting. And now with the washing machines, we're releasing thousands and millions of microfibers and so on. So we need to be smart about it. That would be.
I just really appreciate that this forum, Matt and your team, we're able to gather people from all the different aspects of the efforts surrounding textile and fashion to come together and share our thoughts, because I definitely believe this is something that we have to take a holistic approach, a holistic view to achieve. It's not only the fabric mills, it's not only the brands, it's not only any other NGOs or think tanks. One single party can solve this problem. Actually, one of the most interesting takeaway I got from the working group discussions was a comment made by Kim Lee, one of the major fabric suppliers here in Singapore. They face the pressure to adopt more recycled materials because their customers from Europe, from the US are urging them to use recycled materials. So as a brand, we definitely want to do our part to push the overall trend towards the right direction, but we need the customers to recognize and appreciate the kind of efforts that we're making. And that requires a wider and stronger awareness from the public. And this kind of awareness, we can expect the wider people to just think, oh, I want to go green today. It needs to be the efforts that come from the government, from the industry association, from everybody all together. So I hope we can continue our conversation on this. I'm optimistic, even though there are a lot of roadblocks. And I hope we can continue our conversation from here, and let's make a stronger impact.
I agree with Claudia. I'm very optimistic because right now, I myself in the sector for not so long. I was actually coming from a B2B kind of setting. So I am very looking forward to drive positive change for fashion. And by looking at the the transformation of fashion right now, I really hope that one day we can actually proudly wear one net zero t-shirt, for example. And right now there are actually innovations called Costera. This Costera is actually a carbon dioxide absorption powder. So they can put a coating on your t-shirt. So meaning that you can actually wear one day, your t-shirt is functioning with its role, so absorbing the carbon dioxide. However, it will be so-called flow out together with a baking powder in your detergent. So it's more of a net positive kind of thinking rather than net zero. So it is futuristic, but it is also something that is possible. Costera. So I can actually look some of the puzzle faces here. So it's actually a new innovation, but has not been scaled up yet. As we mentioned, we have a lot of innovations in the ecosystem, but just that, how do we get the right investor? How do we get the right finance institutions to invest into this type of innovation? I think that is really important. And my closing speech is, there are actually 4 levers we need to consider in order to scale the decarbonization in fashion. We need to have technologies, right? The technology that we mentioned just now. And we also need to have people for the know-how, that especially true for academic institutions, to contribute the know-how. And also we need a capital, right? Capital from our good friends. And also, last but not least, we need a very strong partnership across like different stakeholders in the ecosystem. Thank you.
I would like to say that, in fact, I would like to share, after pandemic, there was drastic fall in the revenue of major brands. And that has led to, in fact, deprioritization of sustainability or decarbonization on their agenda. So that has a rippling effect in the supply chain. Because if you look at supply chain, I mean, tier one, there are major tier ones maybe, but tier two, tier three, you can't expect them to understand scope one, scope two, scope three. So what I feel is a good collaborative approach is required between brands and suppliers. There is good handholding and support is expected by suppliers and manufacturers there. So to drive this decarbonization agenda in the supply chain to make it supply.
Great. So we have the QR code on the screen. If we can open up, I think we have time for a few questions. And I'll start with one that I am looking at for the first time, which is what's the textile industry contribution to the percentage of carbon emissions? I'm going to guess that that's global carbon emissions. And I think if you include the transport and energy, I think it's 10%, but I'm going to ask Karen Zaniemi, so I think that's correct. So yeah, I think feel free to send in questions either through the app or to raise your hand for the mic. Yes.
Yeah, thanks to the panel. One question from my side is how about the use of more organic materials like cotton, for example, instead of the use of man-made fibers? I mean, would that be a recommendation towards reducing the carbon footprint? Thank you.
I guess I can take on that. Yeah, definitely organic cotton is one of the things that I think the industry is shifting towards or try to adopt more. But it really depends on what type of clothing you're trying to make. So for regular everyday life t-shirts or maybe even shirts, you can definitely use cotton, organic cotton, and even the other alternative fabrics like bamboo or other, there are all sorts of new materials going on. But for our activewear business, it's still definitely the synthetic fabric, the polyester, nylon that is providing the best performance. We actually tested with some of the other alternative fabrics like bamboo performance fabric or something else. They do really, really bad in terms of stretching and recovery, and they do wick the sweat, but they take a long time to dry. So, when we are making clothing that use the cotton materials, or we can use the cotton materials, we definitely strive for the more organic or more environmental friendly ones, but still synthetic fabric is still yet replaceable on the market at this moment.
Super quickly, cotton for water is worse. So just an example of the trade-offs.
Also bamboo, it sounds very environmental friendly.
Yeah,
it takes a lot of water to process the bamboo into fabric.
And it has to be the right type of bamboo and, the agriculture done in a way as well. Yeah.
I think we're back to the consensus before of complexity. I think another piece to this puzzle is that a lot of the other materials are basically petroleum products, and that's seen as a huge area of growth for the oil and gas companies in a kind of a net zero transition. So I think we're at about 100 million barrels of oil a day. Even in a net zero scenario, they're thinking about still having 20 million barrels in 2050. And that's basically plastics and petroleum-based chemicals, and largely including the fabric, the materials that go into textiles. So I think there's difficult decisions kind of across a number of materials. But one other thing that came up in the discussion was if you are using organic material, you can begin to think about other nature-based solutions in the area where they're grown, and co-benefits and other kind of innovations around that. So complex, but a lot to be done.
Hi, a question for the panel. Earlier on, you said there was lots of solutions for the retail industry. And there was a little bit of a, laugh and smirk, and there's loads and loads, but nothing's being done, or little is being done. Why is that the case, do you think? And what incentives need to be put in place to actually drive the industry as a whole? Is it money? Is it knowledge? Is it capital? Is it PR? Is it pressure from consumers, from other brands, et cetera, et cetera? What do you guys think?
I think it was the smirk was me. So I'll go first. No, it's fine. I think it's a little bit of everything that you've said. So a little bit the history of the fashion industry was, it was bumbling along fine. And then Greenpeace was like, this is an industry that's having a lot of impact. And they did a slew of reports, and it caught the public's attention, it caught investors' attention. It kind of pushed the industry to a precipice, like, you need to clean up, and become more sustainable across all fronts. And then a lot of the brands responded. There was a lot of negative PR, as you can imagine. So that's when a lot of them set their targets and things like that. But that was now 12-ish years ago, something like that. And so there was whenever something bad comes out, a lot of crisis management. And for 5 years, a lot of activity from the industry. And that started with the brands, and then that kind of went down into the manufacturers. And actually, so we did a lot of work in China, and you saw a lot of change in China in the factories. And actually, the government has also been cleaning up a lot. But then it's kind of fizzled, and then you get these piecemeal solutions. And I think that's a little bit one of the biggest obstacles. Is there's waterless dyes, there's a lot on the decarb front. There are platforms that look for waste, for like smaller brands. So like, we have X amount of yards left over, who wants it at a low cost? But it's just nothing seems to be at big enough scale. And whether that's the competition and the really low cost, the low margins, that's my view. I don't know.
I think another piece is, we talked about the complexity. I think there's action to be taken throughout the supply chain, and that's what I would really leave everyone with, whether it's fashion or apparel or another industry that you're involved in. Think about what can you do on the consumer side, the supply chain side, the manufacturing side, the finance side. And that's what I would kind of leave everyone with, is hopefully this provides some inspiration to take away. But I think with that, we're at time. And so I'll hand it back to Matt and the team.